My name is Alexis Rodriguez from the LGBTQ History Museum of Central Florida, and I'm here interviewing Willie King Jr. on September the 16th, 2021, recorded at his house in Sanford, as part of the museum's project in capturing the oral history of Florida's LGBTQ community through drag performers. With us is Jose Arajo recording this interview. Willie King, or known on stage as Gretchen, is a recognizable face within Central Florida's female impersonator culture, performing since the 1980s. Seen not only in the Footlight theater and abroad, Gretchen's legacy and influence has become even more apparent to the subsequent generations of drag performers, to which it brings us here today. Willie, could you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, as your childhood and your life?
Okay, yes. So like I said, I was born in Texas. My dad was always he was like the second or third in command everywhere that we lived. So that's how I knew about the military and my dad. But I have a great relationship with my family. Once they knew I was gay, they stood behind me 100%. And then my dad was like, you probably don't know this, but one of my jobs in the Air Force is counseling airmen with problems. So all that, when they found out, he was like, I'm sure you're glad now that everybody knows it's out, you don't have to hide anymore. All my friends, heavy duty, Miss P, they all knew my parents. And so I have a great relationship with sisters and brothers, and yeah.
What is your ethnic background?
I am Black, Cherokee, Seminole, Indian.
And where have you lived?
Like I said, I lived in Wyoming, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Texas, Michigan, Arkansas, California, and Puerto Rico, but I don't remember much of Puerto Rico.
So did you have any personal role models growing up?
My parents were my personal role models.
And when were you first aware of your sexual identity?
I always knew I was different. And then, back then, they didn't use the term gay, so we were homosexuals then. So I always knew growing up that I was different. And I thought I always wanted to be normal, because I thought I wasn't normal. But then, and it was actually 1977 when I started doing drag.
Oh, 1977, okay. Okay, so let's transition to your work. Could you tell us a little bit about your work experience? What were some of your first jobs, and what was it like working in them?
Okay, so my first job was a clerk at TGNY stores, which I don't think they even exist anymore. So, and I was a fabric cutter. And then I went to the Sheraton Inn, which used to be right as you got off of I-4. Now 417 was there, that was down there. And I was a server, a night auditing clerk, and that's where I had a coworker that asked me, had I ever been to the Parliament House? And I was like, no. Which was eye-opening when he took me there, because growing up in the military and all that, I always thought I was the only gay person around. And then when I got to the Parliament House and I saw, wow, there's a lot of us. So yeah, that was an eye-opening experience.
So what was it like being gay during this time period? Like growing up and going to the house?
It was not talked about a lot, I mean, people knew, but they just didn't talk about it. And I remember now growing up seeing, especially like in towns, because we usually lived on Air Force bases. So when I would see like two women living together or two men, but you never thought anything about it, that they were just good friends. So in the Black community, church, I found that there were a lot of gay people in the churches, playing the pianos, choir directors, yeah.
So how did your sexual identity affect the bonding with the people at the churches, and like, were you...
Great. I got along really good with all of them because my parents, again, were the head deacon and head deaconess in the church here. So everybody knew, but I didn't think everybody knew, you know what I mean? But then the older I got, I realized that, yeah, everybody knew. And I was one of the blessed ones. I don't have any horror stories about being gay. I was never beat up. I've always, like here and most places, since my dad was a high-ranking official, even when young GIs would talk to me, and then as soon as they knew my name, they were like, yeah.
So let's transition to the social climate during the 1980s and 90s of the gay man. I know you were talking a little bit about that. So like during the AIDS epidemic and everything, like...
It was different, but a lot of us, okay, so I performed at the Parliament House. I lived at the Parliament House. So everything that we needed was there. I mean, except to go out, you know, to stores and buy stuff, but they had restaurants and all that, so that was like a safe haven for all of us. So we left there and went to the Palace Club, you know. So I mean, that was the biggest transition for me, was when I was no longer doing drag full time, was to go back into a world where there were straight people and work with straight people. But I've never had a problem.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about Palace Club?
Well, the Palace Club was open until daybreak or the last person left, depends on which happened first. And it was great because all of the people in the service industry, that was the only club open after hours. So by the time, if you worked in service, by the time we're usually finished working, the bars are either about to close or closing. So the Palace Club was just like a mishmash of gay, straight, lesbian, everybody was there. Yeah.
Did you perform it?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah, that was the last performance for most of us on Fridays and Saturday nights was at 3 a.m. That was the last show.
And how did you feel when it closed down?
I had left. I had started doing other things by then because I had done drag for 25, 26 years. So I was kind of burned out. So the Palace Club didn't bother us so much because then it was kind of a relief getting home, not getting home at 9 or 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings. But the Parliament House was different because that was, like I said, a safe haven for a lot of friends that I know now that were put out of their houses, or they ran away from home, or they had to get away from bad situations. So that was really a shocker, you know, and depressing, because that was how we all identified, was Parliament House. Yeah.
So kind of going along with this, so like from what you've seen at P House and the club, or just the whole LGBTQ scene, how did LGBTQ people of color and LGBTQ white people get along? Like, how was the whole race issue at the time?
That was one of the strangest things to me, is because I was born in the late 50s, so growing up, I always thought people knew I was gay, and that's why they would look and treat me different. Then I realized it was because I was black, because my dad was, like I said, a high-ranking official, so everywhere we lived, we were usually the only black family there. So I found us to be very close, but then it was also strange because there was some racism there, and I didn't understand how you could be a racist and be gay when you know how it feels for people to treat you different. Yeah. So that, not a lot of people were, but there were still those few that good Southern people that, yeah, didn't believe in interracial relationships or anything like that. So, but not a lot. Like I said, for the most part, there were more people that were not that way than that were that way.
So Parliament House was more welcoming in a way.
Yes.
Okay. So let's lighten it up a little bit.
Okay.
What were some of the clues that helped you guys identify and find each other? Like during this, like the 80s, 90s, 2000s?
Well, for me, I was 21, 22 years old. So then you just figured whoever showed up, whoever came to the Parliament House was either gay or bi or didn't know. So that was the only way then, because like I said, most of us didn't leave that haven. We just went,
Yeah.
We lived at the Parliament House, we worked at the Parliament House, we went to the Palace Club, and then heavy duty and all that. Like, so we used to go to black, straight nightclubs in drag. And they were very accepting, but it was, yeah, it was a different time. I mean, you could tell people that who were for it and who didn't want anything to do with it.
How and where did the LGBTQ people socialize, and where and how did this change over time? So, like any supportive churches, music venues, meeting halls, bars?
Generally, it was always at, when I first started going to the Parliament House was alive like 24/7. So I mean, people met at the pool, they always had barbecues, they met at the beach in the back of Parliament House where that used to be, and clubs. The only other club, you had the Odds and Ends, which was a gay, all-girls bar, and Southern Nights later came into the picture, because for the longest time, the Parliament House held the reins on that. But then we had a club downtown Orlando. I don't remember the name of that. It didn't last long, but yeah.
Interesting. So the only ones standing is Southern Nights then? Right?
Yeah, yeah. And, well, it's not called the Odds and Ends anymore. I forget what it's called now. It's over by, there's a men's bar over off of Edgewater. No? Yeah, there's an all men's bar, and then right next to them is a girls' bar.
And that girls' bar is the Odds and
It used to be called the Odds and Ends. They've changed the name many times, but yeah.
Okay. So I want to transition into more specific questions about your experiences with and perceptions of drag performances as it relates to transgender identities and communities. So what were your first experiences with drag, and what made you decide to get involved in drag, and how did the drag scene welcome like transgender people at the time?
Again, back in those days, we didn't have transgender, or that's not what it was, called. So when I started working at the Parliament House, you could only have silicone in the face. Generally, in the beginning, they did not take well to, we called them then titty queens, and they didn't, you could only come in the bar. Now when I started too, you could only go in the bar if you were working. They did not let drags just go into the bar, because in their mind back then, all drag queens were prostitutes. So we had to change that perception. And then I was reading somewhere too where I remember when girls were not allowed at the Parliament House. They weren't treated very friendly. Miss Vicky used to be the only female. Well, Blanche and, you ever heard of Blanche? They used to be the owners, Blanche, Sue, they were the strong females. They worked at the Parliament House for a while, and then they usually went to their own bar.
So you have a drag persona, Von Gretchen. Can you tell me when did this persona come to be and some of Von Gretchen's influences?
Okay, so, and by the way, it's V-O-N.
Oh, you are, okay.
Yes. So, I had moved out from all the jobs I had here in Stanford when I was discovering I was gay, and I like to make clothes, so I used to always rush home from work, make me an outfit, and I would go out, and Miss P would always signal me out in the crowd. And then everybody started saying, "What is your drag name?" And I was like, "I don't do drag." And they were like, "You will." So, rent was due, and Heavy ran a talent show. So they're like, "Rent's due, we don't have enough money, you gotta get in drag and do rent, and do a show tonight to see if you can win." So I got in drag that night, I won, and they did it every 6 weeks. So all 6 winners had to come back and compete. 6 winners went back and competed. I won, and then I was hired at the Parliament House. And that's how my drag career began. I just was like thrown into it. And because I could sew and all of that, so I could just whip up an outfit when we had to do it. And Willie Tillman, before the second show, before I won the second thing, he came in and he was always like, "You look pretty, but are you talented?" And he goes, "So do you know the words to your song?" And I was like, "Yes." He goes, "Because all of them over there don't think you're a threat at all." And I was like, "Okay." And I won, and the rest is history.
So you mentioned having duty Miss P. So how was your relationship with him? Like, how did you develop a friendship with him?
Well, during that time, and they still kind of do it now, when they saw somebody that had potential or something like that, they just took you under their wing. So you couldn't do no wrong or anything like that. So they would make me stand in the mirror and do your songs until it looks like that you know every word. You got to look like you know what you're doing. So they kept me on the straight and narrow. They also taught me how, I don't know if you guys know, but the best show is always in the dressing room. So they taught me how to stand up for myself, because it can be very, not only in drag, but in pageants, Miss Americas and all of that, they get in your head, the other girls, if they think you're a threat. So they will try to drag everything you're doing. Are you really wearing that on stage? Oh yeah, that was horrible. So they told me how, you know what, believe in yourself. Don't listen to any of them. Once you think you're good in yourself, don't pay any attention to anything anybody else says. So that was P, Heavy Duty, and Geraldine. So I had it from all 3 of them. Yeah.
So that culture of like reading and being toxic, that's been there since during that time period?
Oh yes. I mean, I always had a smart mouth anyway. So yeah, you have to learn how to stand up for yourself, how to read. And then, I mean, one night they were like, so-and-so didn't show up, so you're the MC tonight. And then that's where you have to learn, because you have to learn on stage how to deal with hecklers, good or bad. And it just was natural.
So you mentioned pageants. Did you participate and win any pageants?
I won 3 pageants: Miss North Florida, Miss Space Coast, and Miss Gold Coast. And then I didn't like pageants because of that meanness, and the club you represented in the LGBTQ community was big. So someone could be winning, but they weren't slated to win. So then whoever they thought was, the best was coming up and all that. And when I started seeing that, and because I danced, backup dancer for like Tiffany Ariagas, Lakeisha Lucky, so I was in the back. I got to see firsthand and hear conversations from the owners and the judges, and I just didn't For me, I didn't like it. I only want to win if I win. I don't want to win just because it was my turn to win. Yeah, so, yeah, I didn't participate much after that.
Have you like gone to see any more, or?
I mean, I used to go see him, and like I said, have you ever heard of Lakeisha Lucky?
Mm-mm.
She's from Tampa, beautiful. So, me and two of our other sisters danced behind her for the Miss Florida contest, and she won Miss Florida. And then we traveled to Chicago and danced with her in the Miss Continental, and we won. She won. So, yes, I like to watch them because I like to see the evening gowns. I like to see talent, to see where it's going, but I just know that little thing that goes on behind. And maybe it doesn't go on. I mean, even in real contest, I believe that too. But, so yeah, that wasn't for me.
Okay. Have you noticed a change in the pageantry, like from when you first kind of started till now? Because I've heard like it has become very saturated, like diluted. You know?
It is. Because Miss P was the show director when I started. So, every day we rehearsed until it looked like that we could do it blindfolded. And that's just the way it was. If you miss rehearsal, you don't work. So nowadays they accept everybody. And back then you weeded the talent out. So it is very saturated. Now it's about the pretty dresses, and you know, you look more like a woman and all that. And then it was talent, and it was just, yeah, different. I have a lot of people always say, please come back and do drag. And I say, yeah, those days are, I mean, I would still perform, but I would never do it full time again.
In what ways do you feel drag performance has evolved from your initial contact? Like, how has it changed?
It's more, when you used to say a drag queen, back in the day, people thought of big men that still look like men, that put on a wig and a dress, and they always thought it was goofy and all that. But now with RuPaul's Drag Race and all that, it is entertainment. It's grown a lot. It's more acceptable. I remember going into some shops back in the day, and when they realized the dresses were going to be for us, they wouldn't sell them to us. So now that's changed. Now, I mean, I think the gay influence on entertainment, period, is a lot different now. Because it's always in the drag world, it was go big or stay home. Mm-hmm. And so now, I think it still is that way, but it is saturated.
You used to do sewing. Have you noticed a change in the outfits nowadays in drag? Like, was drag queens more theatrical in their outfits versus
yes. I mean, and we all generally, back in my day, everybody, you wouldn't go to any drag queen's apartment or room and there not be a sewing machine. Because we would make costumes. That was the whole thing back then too, is that we made mostly all of our own costumes. And now, I think they go buy them a lot. Not the same way it was when we were, that's when Stewart that used to make all my clothes. So, yeah, it's different now that I don't think people take it as serious as we used to take it. But, you know.
Can you tell us a little bit about Stewart?
Yes. He is a writer. And then when I left working for Seminole, I also worked for Seminole County Public Schools. I went to work, I entered an ad in the paper that said they needed an assistant. I went there, I'm filling it out, I see somebody walk by. We hadn't seen each other in probably 25 years. So he walked by, he stopped, and he had changed a lot. And he met me, he was like, Vaughn? And I was like, yes. So then I went to work for him, and he did all the costuming for most of the cruise lines. We made the flying monkey suits for Busch Gardens. He came from Disney as a designer. We did all the clothing for the Dixie Stampede. That's how I met Dolly Parton, because when they opened it here, we did all the costuming for that. And he writes. Do you guys know who Kevin Kelly is? No? He's a performer, live performer. Let me see if I can find Skip on Facebook. And anyone in my era or back knew that if you wanted to win or show or anything in a contest, you wanted to have a Skip Stewart design on. Yes. In fact, that's my appointment today. Later is he's getting ready to start doing corporate Santa Claus, and I'm going to do his hair white.
Okay.
And he also had a play that they did at the Parliament House. He's had several plays at the Parliament House. I don't know if you guys were around for it. One was Trailer Trash. Yeah, that's from back in the day. And so so that's his new thing that he's doing. It's crazy and
Crazy in the Chrysler.
yeah. So yeah. And he's been a good friend since. I have a lot of friends that I've had for 40 plus years. So yeah.
Okay, so while we wrap this up, what would you like to say to the young LGBTQ people, or to those who will come along in the future?
I think now one thing that I miss, period, is that we looked out for one another. You know what I mean? If you were too drunk or something, and we wouldn't let you leave with a strange man. Then nowadays, I don't think people look out for one another like we used to make sure that you're okay, you're safe, and all that. So I would always say, just never forget about a friend, even if they're not a friend. If somebody you see that it doesn't look right, step in, you know, and that's what I would say, is just remember that we're all one big family to me, and that we should all look out for one another. And if somebody does something to hurt you, it should hurt me. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss or say?
I want to ask you guys a question. So do you know where the new Parliament House is supposed to be? I mean, I know they say City Arts, the comedy club that used to be on the top. So is that where it is?
So from what we've heard, it's on Orange and Pine.
Yes.
So right there, yeah. Those are the rumors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I say I know the building because I work in catering, and so we've done lots of parties there, and I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how that's gonna work.
it'll be interesting.
Yes.
It'll be interesting, but there's nothing like the old Parliament House.
Yeah.
There will
It's
never,
not
ever.
gonna-
One of the things that touched me the most is a lady I worked with in Seminole County Public Schools. I became very close with her. She passed away. I also became close with her kids. So I went to her repast. And all of her nephews and stuff were there with their wives and kids. And they started talking about they couldn't believe the Parliament House had closed. And they were really upset because they were like, what's going to happen to the young gay kids that got kicked out of their houses and they have nowhere to go? And that touched me because I thought, wow, these are straight people and they're worried about what's going to happen with the gay community. Yeah.
Parliament House.
Parliament House, yes. I was just like, I mean, because you could go there, stay there. If you got too drunk, you could get a room, and now, what?
There's a vacuum, there's a void.
There's going to be a void. And it will never be the same because you could go there and stay there. You know, and I mean, now you'll have to, even if it is there, I just wonder about the dynamics of downtown Orlando. because it can be scary sometimes. So that's going to be interesting.
That's gonna be interesting. Well, thank you, Willie, for your time here with us today. The LGBTQ History Museum of Central Florida, and I greatly appreciate the amount of information you provided in order to add to this reservoir of LGBTQ history. Thank you.
You're welcome.